A lot of equipment, not a lot of setup.
Yeah, I mean, we lit it, but, they were very basic lighting setups that were, as unobtrusive as we could make them, and I think that, lots of times the sets were 360, so it was just me and Ethan in the other room, the DP, the cinematographer, who's here. Ethan, where are you? There he is. Yeah, so we were outside on the monitor. We couldn't monitor live, which was really, really stressful for me. So I just was listening. I was like, what the fuck are they doing in there? So then we'd be able to monitor afterwards, but it was always, do we monitor because they could do another take the amount of time we could monitor. So we didn't. Yeah, that was sort of a challenge. But on the other hand, because our lighting setups were quick, we could do a lot of takes.
You mentioned that this is your first foray into narrative, so you have a background in documentaries. You've made 4 feature documentaries. Maybe you could talk a little bit about jumping into.
Yeah, well, I actually when I graduated from Columbia undergrad, my thesis film was fiction. I thought I was going to make fiction, and then I got sucked into docs for the better part of my 20s, and. But actually, it's funny because I've been asked this a couple times with that whole like the transition thing, and I don't. It doesn't feel that different to me. I was talking about this today, and
you're all swingers. You all go back and forth.
Right, yeah. I mean, you have a relationship with your subjects in a documentary, and that's a complex relationship, and you're trying to get things out of them. And the same thing is true of working with actors. You have this complex. Of course, it's different. The primary thing is that I think it's an inverted model. So in a documentary, you kind of go out in this kind of messy reality, you record a bunch of it, and then you kind of write the movie in the room. In this case, obviously, Mike and I wrote the script. Well, the story was mine. Mike wrote it, but and then you go out into messy reality and try to execute on your idea. So that's the only thing, is the model is inverted, but that's the only real difference I feel in terms of experiencing.
Speaking of writing, maybe you could talk a little bit about writing versus the actors improvising. Right? Again, I know it's a cliche question, but how much scripted and how much?
Yeah, actually, Mike Roberts is up there, and he's a local Austin guy. So, he and I have these really long Skype calls. They go on for like hours and hours and hours, and. It's great. It's one of the best kind of collaborative relationships in my life. And when I brought the idea up to him, he just immediately got it. Got this kind of really obnoxious character. That was. I don't know. We talked about Cartman a lot from South Park. We talked about the Muppets. We talked about and just the kind of the ugly American and just. And I don't know, so anyway, most of the movie, I would say, we were usually on the script, at least pretty much, and then sometimes some takes would go on and off, but most of the lines in there, Mike wrote, so. Yeah, here, Rod.
What was really cool is we'd often go off script to find our way back to the script. Andrew gave us a lot of leeway to, play with it, but it's funny, we always would come back to what, almost identically to what Mike wrote. We would do some things to maybe shake the scene up a bit if it wasn't, working quite right, and then what we'd end up back with there with all that knowledge of what we, the gaps we'd filled in. So,
I think that's an intense tribute to you guys as actors. Is for me to even think that was improv. Just the reality of what you got. It was pretty.
Yeah, no, and actually with Louisa, because of course, there's not a scene that she's not in, pretty much, and I don't feel like there's one dishonest moment in the whole movie. Like, you just believe her every second of the way. So that is just a tremendous. No, I think it's incredible. When I was shooting it, I was like, my God, I was like, this is beyond method, man. Because she was just like this amoeba that was like in the skin of King Kelly, and I think I kind of turned into King Kelly too. So we were both like King Kellying back and forth, and it was great because it just gave the whole movie a lot of energy. And but it's just intense to be in every scene. And the other thing that's really interesting to point out is that in most movies, you don't look right at the lens very often.
Right.
I mean, in fact, you're not supposed to. So in this movie, like in terms of not only as an actor or actress, but in terms of an audience, like you have these people staring right at you the whole time, which I think is intense. And that's a shift in cinematic style. I mean, and you couldn't even call it cinematic style, post-cinematic style, I guess you could say, because really that is the language of the internet, and that's the language of YouTube and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's kind of an interesting development. And Susan, stop it. Okay. Anyway.
Feel free to open, I want to obviously open it up for any questions anybody has. Just speaking about, yeah. Question was about holding the camera and DP.
No, she just asked like how the DP worked with the.
I don't have much of a voice.
Ethan, I can do
I
it.
gotta start answering.
We have two mics.
We would rehearse the camera in rehearsals. On the first couple takes, I would operate and kind of map out the blocking, and then we would do subsequent takes. They would just operate. I would say I operated about 25% of the time.
Yeah, I'd have to say that actually that was a really cool part because when we started, Ethan was like, was operating a lot more, and then Ethan and I were watching the takes, and we're like, oh, it's kind of more fun when they're operating. It's just it's more what it is. So I think Ethan, I think it was you, said, look, let's just let him do it sometimes, and so we did that more, and we'd shoot safety sometimes, that Ethan shoot it, and we did use that sometimes. But in general, that was like one of the coolest parts of making the movie was I mean, they were camera, they were operating cameras, so that was cool.
I'm going to just toss the mic down to the actors here. How do you feel about being also operators and actors? And
Oh, I found it so empowering to be able to, film myself. Yeah, it was so fun, and I thought of it as more of an extension of my character, so I wasn't really worried about like technical, stuff. It was an extension. Yeah.
Yeah, going off of that, it was a lot of fun. But also, I think this lens and this device is how these characters interact with the world and with each other a lot of the time. So it was a lot of fun, but it also was very natural, and it helped me to get in character a lot of the times. As soon as you'd have the device, you could sort of like be in character because it is, I think, the eye for how they see a lot of things. It's a very exhibitionist way of being. It's a very self-conscious way of being. But I think it's also very natural for them. It doesn't, like it, they're filming. That's what they're doing. I don't think it's a thing that crosses their brain too much. So that was a lot of fun too.
I didn't really operate.
A little bit.
A little bit in the end. I mean,
feel free to speak on any topic.
yeah. I mean, for me, it was, I'd watched the two of them. I'd watched them operate it the whole time. So as we've been filming, so I got a little bit of a sense of how they were doing it. But that scene was more about, taking the power away from Kelly and turning the camera on her, and the camera getting taken from her, and that was what was, I don't know.
I mean, it was interesting, especially watching it again, because a lot of times we're filming, so you don't see us, but you hear the voice, and I'm as an actor, like watching it, it's so interesting to hear the range of force that a voice can go to, just to get what somebody wants, or to, it was really, it's like something that I didn't think of when I was making the movie, and then when I watched it,